Welcome to the Humans Against Poor Scholarship Summer Grant Interviews. Each one of our interviewees is competing for a $2,000 grant to help fund their summer research. Do you want to have a say in who gets funded? Become a HAPS donor today by visiting www.hapsfund.com/donate.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. If you just joined me for the prior interview, thank you for coming along. We are back with our second HAPS exit interview of the day. Contrary to the little introduction there, Virginia has already done the competing side of things. She has been awarded her grant and has very kindly come back to tell us about how her research went. Virginia, hello. Welcome back to Digital Hammurabi. Thank you for joining me again.
Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be back to talk about what I did during this summer. I just shortly introduced myself to you, so everybody knows me. And so I am now a third-year DPhil student in what is now the DPhil degree in Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. That was the ex-Oriental Study degree in Oxford University. And actually, I am really pleased to be here again and to talk about what are my interests and what my research focuses on, because I think it's something that should be everyone. What I would like to talk about is my research interests, basically, and what I did during this summer. So I'm interested in boat transport during the year 3 period, because basically I should be a future Assyriologist. And what I do, so it's studying year 3 texts, so late third millennium texts, and from a specific area, that it's the modern South Iraqi area. So what I do is studying how boat transport worked and what was the economic importance of boat transport for that period and for that society, because we know that Mesopotamia was, of course, a land that was rich of watercourses and also canals, and these canals were used to transfer different goods from one city to the other. And that was, one of the main interests of the year 3 kings and also of the year 3 administration, local administrations, because that was the most effective way to trade, we could say, but it's not the perfect term to use for that period. And so this was the main way that they used to move, we could say, goods, to redistribute them among the different cities and throughout the whole state. So what I do basically is analyze the text, so read the Sumerian texts and go through them to understand how boat transfers worked and if there were specific partnerships among or between two different localities, and which were the goods that were moved from one place to the other. And what I did this summer, in fact, was when we first met, I explained that I was going to start the textual analysis of the year 3 corpus. And what I did this summer was spend all my time to working on the texts and gathering as much data as possible. And what turned out is that it is probably possible to say, so it is very likely, according to me, that there were specific partnerships so among different cities, and that there were some cities that were more involved. And of course, we're talking about the most important cities of the state. So the different capitals of the different area and on the different areas. And these cities were really involved in boat transfers. And also there were different regions that were involved in boat transfers in different ways. So we have a clearer view of what happened and how this happened. And also I can say with a certain grade of certainty that there were also, specific partnerships concerning the goods that were transferred from one city to the other. So we know that there were specific areas interested in the production or in the, manufacture of different products. And these products were transferred in 2 different cities or 2 different stockyards. So basically, what I can say at the moment is that concerning my dissertation, I am at a good point, and at this stage, I am really working and focusing on my confirmation exam. That it's the exam that is supposed to confirm my research project and also to confirm my candidate status for the university. But and the most important thing is that actually I am trying to prove myself right, not because I want to be right, but because the text effectively explain that the situation was really much more complicated than we can imagine, because we had a society, we're talking about a society with a high bureaucracy, like modern society basically. And that's one of the main reasons that why it collapsed at the end. But this bureaucracy is also proved, and the proof of the existence of this bureaucracy is also in both transfers, because we have a lot of written texts talking about, telling us a lot of information concerning what happened daily. So we have a clear picture of the daily life of these people, because we're talking about rations for workers and products that were used to sustain the population. So basically, we're talking about what people needed every day and how people went on with their lives every day. But
Sorry, I just have a quick question, Virginia.
yes, of course.
Does that mean that most of the things being transported on these boats were food items, or do we see other things also?
Well, it depends on the different regions, but basically we have most of food items, as you were saying. So basically, you have cereals, that is the most produced in ancient Mesopotamia. You have barley, that is the most transferred product, but also you have liquid products like oil, milk, or cheese, or butter, and also fish, of course, from the Gulf region, and also from the different water courses. And but also you have also the instance of different we could say non-edible products, like wool, that was used to pay workers, because workers were paid with barley and wool, so they basically go together. And also you have a lot of transfers of materials, raw materials, to maybe sometimes you have, for example, bitumen transfers or wood transfers, that were the materials used to build boats. So you have transfers of materials that are used to build boats on boats and go into the shipyards. It's a bit complicated, but this also happened. And sometimes you also have, transfers of, maybe materials used for buildings or different purposes. But most of the transfers concern food, or in any case, products used for paying workers. Mainly it's food and rations for workers that always go together. Also, workers transferred on boat, because workers were intended to be more a product than people in that time. So we always need to contextualize what we're talking about. And in that time, workers were more used as a product. So an amount of workers was transferred or maybe put somewhere to go on with different activities. And also maybe you have a lot of workers, or maybe also livestock. Now that I'm thinking about the product that are transferred, livestock or maybe slaughtered animals. So, but basically it's always, as you can understand, products or material or raw materials that which main purpose is to become food, or they're products that are already food, or products that are meant to be food. So basically rations for the to sustain the people.
Fascinating, thank you. So you said that you managed to do a lot of your translation work and look at the actual data this summer. What are your plans moving forward?
Well, basically I'm working, as I told you, on the confirmation exam. So after that, I will just focus on writing up my dissertation and put all the data in different tables and appendixes that will go with the dissertation, and also work on the final viva. But beside that, I'm also working on different conferences, and the grant, the fund supported me to be part of a conference in Budapest this summer that was organized by the European Association of Archaeologists. And I had the opportunity to present and introduce my work there. And also from that conference, I have been invited to present again in Copenhagen next year. Yes, and I'm working with in a session concerning sustainability, because I strongly believe that the boat craftsmanship, so the boat building craftsmanship, has been preserved in modern Iraq, as it is really possible to see even now, and this craftsmanship could be also, preserved and still used to build boats that can be used on modern Iraqi marshlands, and that could be maybe a sustainable way to move along and try to avoid as much as possible the pollution that is a real big problem in Iraq, because Iraq is really polluted. So that could be an interesting point of view on the possible preservation of ancient techniques that can be a really good support for our future, basically.
That's really exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We have a couple of questions from the audience before we let you go. Luru says, could you please mention some specific examples of intense connections between cities? Which cities are you talking about?
Well, of course, I'm talking about ancient cities that no longer exist. So the main cities that I'm talking about are, of course, Nippur in the north, and Girsu Lagash in the south, and Umma, of course, which were some of the cities that hosted harbors or shipyards. But there are a lot of smaller localities and cities that are mentioned in text that, and sometimes it is so really difficult to geolocate the different localities, because it is really struggling to understand the exact locations of some of the toponyms that are mentioned in the texts. But of course, we have information concerning the main cities, because we have archaeological ruins and archaeological instances of these cities. But it's so difficult to understand which are the other localities, because there were, a lot of, we could say, caravan stops, and also for the different routes. And so you have a lot of different localities that have been lost throughout the time, through the millennia. So sometimes it's really struggling to understand which are the exact locations. But of course, it is a bit easier to understand the main cities, because you have the exact mentioning. But also sometimes you don't have a mention of the localities, so you just try to understand with the support of other information. Or there are other times when it is impossible to understand the location. But mainly, if I have to make an example, I would say that there was a strict link between the southern areas of Iraq, so the main city of Girsu, and also the city of Susa, that is in modern Iran, which were really strictly connected. And this is a good example because there was a really strict connection and continuous exchange of organic products between the two cities.
Thank you very much. Bernardo wants to ask, what kind of risks did the transports face? Were there attacks and thefts that they had to worry about?
Well, probably boat transport was safer than land transport, because land transport was really subjected to different attacks or stealings and, things like that. But boat transports, of course, had to face the problems linked to the flooding or to the, drought moments. So I can say with a certain grade of awareness that the year 3 people planned very well their boat transfers, because they had a lot of workers also employed for the building of different water devices that were used to guarantee the navigation on a yearly basis. So they had a lot of different different structures and devices that were planned to let and to grant the opportunity to navigate during the whole year, and also to have a safe navigation, because it was the main way that they used to even to just move from one place to the other, not for any exchange. It was just the main way that they had to move. So they had to be safe when they moved. So everything was really well planned. And so they had specific routes that were always the same. And these routes were yearly maintained and repaired if anything was needed, even for the levees of the canals or even for the water devices and things like that. They were permanently repaired and maybe sometimes reconstructed or moved from one place to the other if it was needed, because they had to plan and even organize everything. And so they had to be safe in the different activities, because the cargoes were really significant and relevant. So they could not lose any of the cargoes, but of course it is of course likely that there were shipwrecks, we could say, even if a shipwreck is not so it's not so frequent as it happens in the sea, isn't it? So I can say that it was a really safe way to move from one place to another city.
Thank you. Ray asks, in Sumerian cities split by the Euphrates, like Shuruppak, how did people manage trade during periods of flooding?
Sorry, could you repeat? I had problems.
In Sumerian cities that were split by the Euphrates, like Shuruppak, how did they manage trade during periods of flooding?
Oh, yes. So I kind of answered the question before, because as I was saying, they had works done for water devices that were meant to create a regular water level on the different water courses. In the different water courses, so they had a lot of dams or barrages or devices that were meant to create a regular water level, so to manage the water level of the different water courses. And this was of course meant to guarantee, as I was saying, navigation on a yearly basis. So they had everything was calculated, so they knew when there were the floodings and which were the periods of drought. And in this case, they were of course organized, and had the possibility to manage the water level artificially, of course. And that's why it was so important to have a lot of workers on the different water canals and natural water courses, because everyone was in charge of administrating a different place, and there were a lot of workers employed for the repair and the construction of different water devices that were meant to prevent the flooding or also the problems linked to the floodings.
Thank you. I'm sorry, sir, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, but Iraq is most at risk from the rivers silting up, from what this viewer has read. Will this be a worry, especially in regards to what you're talking about as modes of transport, or is this not actually that much of a problem?
Well, it depends, because it depends on the different areas of Iraq. In the same way, when we talk about the ancient Iraq and also when we talk about modern Iraq, because we have really different environments still today. And for what concerns ancient times, they had solution even for the silting up of the rivers, because they planned even the irrigation and the agriculture period. So they had a system of rotation even to prevent that. For the modern times, I'm not really sure what they are working on and how they're managing that, because the marshlands still work as they were 5,000 years ago. So basically, Iraqi people living in the marshlands still live as people lived during the late third millennium. So they have the same kind of houses. The environment has not really changed, but of course that's a different thing when we talk about modern cities like Baghdad, because as I was saying before, the exploitation of the environment is completely different, and of course the human impact on the environment is really different. So it is probable that also they have a different way to manage the problems linked to the risks of the rivers, but they really exploit the waters, because they use the rivers as main ways to for all their waste and for all the waste of the different industries and facilities that they have there. And when I firstly went there, what really surprised me was to see that they don't really have a clear idea of how important is their environment at the moment, because they don't really care about the environmental impact that they have. So what happens today is just exploiting as much as possible and going on with the we could say westernization of that locations. And this is really sad, because they don't really value their heritage. They're just exploiting their areas, their land. On the contrary, the southern areas are still the same as I was saying before. So there is a really big difference among the different areas of Iraq at the modern in that moment. And so that's one of the main reasons why also I try to explain to the scholars that it's important that they still preserve their ancient techniques, and that can be a sustainable way to go on in Iraq, as also in other different areas of the ancient Near East and modern Near East.
Thank you. We have one final question, and then we will let you go and get on with the rest of your evening. Did people in Mesopotamia wait for the flood seasons to move their barges and their boats for transporting goods, or was it a year-round occupation?
So, of course, there was a precise organization for the works on the barrages and a well-planned organization schedule, we could say, on how and when to move the different products and the animals. And of course, this was planned according to the flooding seasons, that it was during spring and during fall, but they did not wait for the flooding, of course, because that would be a risk. That would have been a risk for the workers. So they used to work on the barrages, having the barrage put on the levees of the watercourse, and then huge amounts of workers, so a lot of teams of workers, moved the barrage in the water when it was needed. So you have also different plannings for the different water devices, because they were made, I forgot to say, they were made of organic materials, so it was easy. I mean, not easy, but it was possible to move them from the levees of the from the banks of the canal in the water, because they were mainly made of reeds, straw, and earth mixed together with mud and then put in the water. So it was possible to move the barrage even from in different places, because the barrage was just was put in the water to manage the water level. So when the water level was good enough, it allowed it the navigation. So you had a huge, really wide canal blocked from the with the barrage, and then you had part of the canal that was open, still open, allowing the navigation on the water. So basically, you have different seasons meant for different works, but of course they had this planning and different teams of workers that were, like in a chain. So you have workers working on the water devices and workers transferring different products. So they were organized in a really complicated way that was efficient on the final purpose, that was the transfer on the water.
Thank you so much, Virginia. We are going to end there. I really appreciate you coming back and telling us about your research and about how your summer went. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure was mine. I was really happy.
Good. Audience, thank you all so much for joining us. If you would like to know more about HAPS, you can go to www.hapsfund.com and read all about who we are, what we do. You can even make a donation if you feel particularly generous. And we will be back, I believe, next weekend with our final exit interview. So please do join us then. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?